Hey, I'm Rocky Mullet. I made a game in 7 days for Brackeys Game Jam 2022.2. After taking part of Game Jam 2, who had 412 entries, I wanted to be part of a big jam again. I've been planning to be part of this jam since April this year, and with 1093 entries, it definitely was a big jam. I always go into a jam with a goal. I've been wanting to make an action game focusing on melee attacks for a while now. But I felt my animation skills were not ready. I've been practicing a lot since I made my last game autocorrected, and I finally felt ready. While I'm nostalgic of the Super Nintendo era, I wanted to take inspiration from a more up-to-date game design, and an obvious choice was Hollow Knight. The movement is great, the 3 directional attacks lead to simple to understand combat, yet allow a lot of depth. So before the jam, I sat down and played Hollow Knight. I wasn't planning to make a full Metroidvania, obviously, so I played the beginning, where you experience the mechanics in their simplest form, to understand the combat and take notes on the enemies. I also watched a video of all boss fights, to take notes on how to challenge the player in an interesting way. As I usually do, I made a plan, breaking down what I should be doing on each day of the jam. On the day of the jam, I got up at 5:30 AM to start as soon as the theme was revealed. And the theme was... You are not alone. I will spoil the story of the game, so if you want to try my game Rosa's Curse beforehand, the link is in the description. The theme made me think of a creature lurking in the background, leading to a boss fight in the end. I thought it would look very cool to have it hide in tall grass, having a big fight in a large grass field. To apply the You Are Not Alone theme, the player would need to cure a cursed friend possessed by an entity, picking up some kind of artifact in a deserted landscape that would anger creatures protecting it, bringing enemies into the picture. So the theme would be there twice, enemies spawning in the previously deserted landscape, and the cursed friend being possessed, ultimately being the final boss. I had a good experience with the silhouette art style from my game Fast. It makes it very efficient to create animations, since you don't have to detail every animation frame. So I decided to do that again, this time with shades of blue. I saw Vimlark make a mock-up of one of his games on YouTube, and I thought it would be great to test what would be the right colors for gameplay, the layers of the grass, the background, etc. The first thing I made for the game was a black tile set, with a single color background based on my mockup. Unreal's physics simply dies at some point if you fill large spaces of a tile mat with collision. I had some headaches in Fast, where I wouldn't know what was a floor tile and a filling tile, because they looked the same. So for placeholder, I made a fill tile to have a visual difference between the tiles with collision and the empty ones. Then for the playable character, I made an idle, a walk, and a variable height jump. I coded a custom camera with a height offset based on the player's vertical velocity, so that the character's sprite is higher on screen when jumping and lower on screen when falling, which gives a better feel of the movement. Now the attacks. I made a placeholder animation for an upward, downward, and forward attack, with different swipe effects if the attack lands or not. A static placeholder enemy, I used the same principle as in my game Tough Fluff, where the enemy sprites are pushed back with some stretch and squash. I implemented the pogo jump, which is more or less a double jump when hitting a downward attack. I made bouncers, meant to pogo jump on, players' health, death, and respawn. I made checkpoints right away. My rating for Xander Jam 6 was pretty much ruined by the lack of checkpoints, so I learned my lesson. And I made good old spikes. The last thing I made in my first full day was working on camera bounds and level transitions to be able to make some level design. Monday, before work, I started on AI. I coded line of sight in a concept of aggro. I took inspiration of Hollow Knight again and made the enemy idle, then have an anticipation animation before charging toward the player and wait a little before charging again. After work, I made it so that attacking the enemies pushes them and the player backwards, then made the enemies lose health and die. I was late on plan and I can't make level designs without all the enemies. So I first made a charger enemy that was only a tweaked version of the first enemy, with longer anticipation, faster movement speed, and a bit more health. I like that in my game Tough Love, I had a gift box that the player needed to attack to regain HP. So I thought of making a health pack enemy that would give HP when killed. I took inspiration of Dark Souls crystal lizards that would run away and hide in the ground when aggroed. So I only had to change their AI so they would move away from the player when aggroed, and play a digging animation once they are done moving and despawn them after a duration. It's the only enemy that is not completely black. It has some green to be a reminder of the health UI. The last enemy was influenced by Hollow Knight's Husguard. It's a large enemy with a melee attack and a lot of health. Tuesday morning, I made a flying enemy moving with acceleration and will overshoot its target to challenge the player's airborne movement and directional attacks. At this point, the only enemy left to do was the boss. I wanted something creepy with a cool silhouette and a big shape so it's easy to animate. As I was trying things, I came up with a skeleton head in some kind of robe. I liked that it was a bit unclear what it actually was, giving me more freedom to make the animations. I wanted the player to have to jump over the boss, so I made the boss too tall to jump over but make it smaller when charging, forcing the player to jump over and sneak a pogo jump for extra damage. I do not like boss fights who are invincible all the time, with some temporary openings. It's too telegraphed for me. So instead I gave the boss a melee attack when the player is close, forcing the player to think of a good moment to attack without taking damage, giving it a risk and reward twist that I like. I was planning to have purple projectiles falling from the sky, inspired by Hollow Knight's False Knight boss. But at this point I didn't have any range in me or level hazard that would teach that to the player prior to the boss fight, so I decided to stay with the black silhouette and make rocks fall from the sky. I hate it in games where you have no way of regaining health during a boss fight. It means that if you get hit early in the fight, you lose hope of beating it because you are not full HP for the hard part and have no way of healing, so you just wait to fail so you can start again. I feel having a way to regain HP means that even with 1 HP left, there's always hope on every attempt. It was part of my motivation to make the health pack enemies, but since I was running out of time, I decided to merge the health pack spawning and the falling rocks, and made the last rock of the attack spawn an health pack enemy. Since it's a game jam game, people want to try multiple games and will grant you a limited amount of their time to play your game. I didn't want the players to give up on the boss because it's too hard, and I didn't want the more skilled players to be bored. So I stole an idea from Inbound Shovel that they implemented in their Game Jam 2 game Isadora's Edge. I made it so that every time the player dies from the boss is losing max health, making it easier and easier every time, giving the impression to the player that they are getting better at it, and the ones who can beat it the first time can still be challenged. I can finally start thinking about level design and flow. The only missing thing was something to stop the player from just ignoring every enemy. So I made a door that you need to hit multiple times to open, so ignoring enemies will lead to them attacking you while you are busy attacking the door. Attacking a cog will make the cog spin and slowly open the door until it reaches a threshold to open it completely. Then I planned every level, listing what they require to have so the game has a good progression for tutorials, difficulty curve, and story. The tutorial will need to teach about the jump, the attack, the pogo jump. All new enemies would be introduced alone at the beginning of a level, then challenged later in the level. For the story, at that point I thought I would make an intro cutscene that I didn't make in the end. I wanted to have the cursed friend to be in a bed with a magician character that would be the player's helper and exhibition provider, and since I wanted the friend to be recognizable, I thought the silhouette of a little girl would be easier to recognize, so I changed the cursed friend to be the cursed daughter of the main character instead. So the flow of the story would be the player finding the legendary MacGuffin to cure their daughter, triggering something that would make the enemies spawn to fit with the "You Are Not Alone" theme. So the ultimate goal of the player can't be about finding it, but actually about returning to their daughter that would end up being the final boss that the player needs to defeat to break the curse. So first level is the tutorial. I added images that will show the inputs for both keyboard and gamepad, a small jump, and then a higher step to understand that you can hold the input to jump higher, and a door to learn to attack forward. The next level starts with a more advanced tutorial about the pogo jump, requiring you to jump and do a downward attack on a bouncer. Then I brought back the conversation system that went through a couple of iterations in my past games, so I can start implementing the story. The magician would teleport the player near the legendary MacGuffin and talk to them via telepathy, so it would allow the main character to have someone to talk to during the game for both story and tutorial purposes. After the tutorial, the player gets the legendary MacGuffin, making the enemies appear and checking the box for the theme. Next level starts with the simplest enemy to introduce the player to combat. A small section with slightly branching paths with a couple of them, introduction to the health pack enemy in case the player lost some HP, ending the level with the first door with enemies in front of it. Fourth level, you get to fight flying enemies, alone at first, then mixed up with other enemies, with some verticality to make it different from other levels. Thursday, I really need to finish level design and ask for playtesters. Next enemy to be introduced is the hammer enemy. Since it can be considered a kind of mini-boss, I felt it didn't really need anything else in the level. Instead, I took the opportunity to make the story progress. The magician who is supposed to be attending to the daughter, Rosa, has lost her, teasing to the fact that she lost control over the curse and giving a sense of urgency to the story. Next level starts with simple platforming with bouncers to have some time for more story without being distracted by enemies. Introduction to the charger enemy alone, with a door so the player had to fight it, but with a checkpoint right after before the final room with enemies, which is mixing everything, even a hammer enemy at the bottom. All enemies at their level to introduce them, so next level is about building up for the boss. The player encounters a shape in the grass that looks like Rosa, to build up the tension toward encountering her and ultimately the final boss. The rest of the level is only a few enemies. The player has been challenged enough at this point. The boss level starts high, so the player has the feeling of descending into the large grass field. The player meets Rosa in a short cutscene, mentioning that she should not be alone in a dangerous place, but Rosa answers that she is not alone. Referring to the theme again, she is with her new friend, and transforms into the final boss. Level design is done. I slapped together a main menu and the usual sub-menus to finally upload a build to be playtested. I received a lot of feedback. Some were quick fixes, some I left unaddressed because of the low severity of the problem. One thing I addressed was the last part with all the chargers was too hard. Way too many flying enemies, falling down would lead to getting one shot by the hammer. I removed a couple of enemies, repositioned them so they would not all aggro at once, and added some health pack enemies. Then there was some feedback about the story. The cursed daughter was mentioned too briefly, so it wasn't clear that it was the goal. Since I didn't have much time to remake the whole story and since I caught the intro cutscene, I decided to name the game Rosa's Curse. So based on the name, it would be easier to remember the daughter's name and that she's cursed. It's not the best name, and I had better ones suggested to me, but that name was serviceable. There's another thing I didn't think about at all, because I'm the one who made the game. Without a win screen or a final cutscene, it really seemed like the story of the game made a father put his own daughter out of her misery, which is way darker than I intended. So I really had to make the ending clear on what's going on. Now it was time for art. All of the art style revolved around the blue background and the grass. So I first made a couple of layers of parallax with dead trees and mountains. I made tests in the past of grass being affected by wind, using Unreal's procedural meshes. It was working fine in a hard-coded test level, but when I tried to use it with parallax, my math was off, and I had multiple issues with it. So after about 4 hours wasted on it, I had to kill my darling and forget about the grass fields in the background. I changed the parallax for simple hills, but kept 2 layers of grass on the gameplay layer, since that part was working and still looked cool. I made the checkpoint a waving flag, based on a cool cape animation tutorial I saw on Twitter. I remade the spike heart, cause it was too similar to the grass, leading to confusion why sometimes you get hit and sometimes you don't. Then I finally made Rosa, in the grass with a hiding animation. To fix the issue about the end of the story not being clear, I made a death animation for the boss, where everything turns white, showing the green MacGuffin slicing the boss in half and releasing Rosa. It's Saturday now, the last day. I'm not even close to being done. I worked on the sequence where the player would get the MacGuffin, a floating animation, a pickup animation, and a camera shake with a creepy sound, implying that the player angered some ungodly things by taking it. Then it was time for music and ambient sound. I first added a wind ambient sound without any music. Combined with the moving grass, it gives a feel of loneliness in that deserted place. Once you defeat the first enemy, that's when the music kicks in. As usual, I used Steven Melin's excellent music. I went for an atmospheric ambient music for the levels, a more somber and stressful song when the player learned that their daughter is missing. Something mysterious when we meet Rosa, and an epic boss fight track. Then I slapped in a couple of sound effects, including a low health feedback. It's midday by then, I need to wrap this up. So I made a final version of the main menu and an end screen with a special animation of the main character and Rosa, so it's clear that they are reunited and that she is very much alive. Later in the evening, I finalized the player's animations, the walk animation, the jump, the fall, the upward attack, the downward attack, and 2 alternating forward attacks. Since time was running out, the most obvious placeholder art was the hammer enemy, so I remade it, giving it a kind of ogre/orc look, which I don't hate. At this point it was almost midnight. It was time to clear out that to-do list. I remade the art of the first enemy. I didn't have many ideas, so since it doesn't really have an attack and only damage you on contact, I made it a spiky creature. The only art left was the charger. Making it a minotaur made sense so players can expect a charging enemy. Then I added directional camera shakes to add more impact on the attacks. It was getting late, I was struggling to add more sound effects, and I felt like I was about to break everything because I was too tired. It was almost 3 AM, so it was time to submit. I tested the build, uploaded it, made the page as pretty as I could with a couple of screenshots and GIF, and submitted the game to the jam. As I'm editing this, the jam is still in ratings, So far comments are very positive, so I'm confident to have a good game on my hands. Brackeys Game Jam 2022.2 had over 1,000 submissions. It was awesome to be part of such a big jam. I'm very happy with the game I made and I can't wait to know the results. I'm Rocky Mullet. If you want to try Rosa's Curse or any of my stuff, the links are in the description. If you enjoyed this devlog, maybe like and subscribe.